Fantasy Matt Camp Fantasy Football Lead Writer August 29, 2017. We continue to wait for good news on Andrew Luck. Brace Hemel Garnosa Today Sports. With 3 preseason games out of the way and less than 2 weeks to go before the start of the regular season, it's a good time to assess what the preseason meant to the fantasy values of key players. Statistical outputs in the preseason mean little, but seeing how players fit into roles and how much playing time they're getting with each unit of the offense is important. With Kareem Hunt taking over the starting running back job in Kansas City, following the injury to Spencer Ware, I feel confident knowing HES performed well with the starters in multiple preseason games. One player we haven't seen at all in training camp or preseason action is Andrew Luck. A healthy Luck has been a top 5 quarterback in the past, but his 2017 fantasy value continues to plummet thanks to a lengthy recovery from off-season shoulder surgery. He remains on the PUP list with no indication of when he'll see his first action of any kind. It's important to look at the big picture of the preseason when you assess the direction players are moving as the regular season approaches. In addition to my feelings on whether a player is on the rise or falling, I also included where each player was ranked in my big board article following the first full week of preseason games and where I have them now. Note all ADP data from Fantasy Football Calculator accurate as of 828. All fantasy stats used to calculate finishes from Fantasy Pros. All advanced stats calculated using data from Pro Football Reference. All stats based on points per reception format. Dalvin Cook is one of many rookie running backs on the rise. Scott Eklund Associated Press. Dalvin Cook is just one of a handful of rookie running backs to impress this month, which is setting him up for a significant and possibly starting role in Week 1. IWASNT. Very excited about Cook's fantasy prospects for this season and still think his ADP of 24.4 RB12 is too high. However, I also recognize that everything seems to be breaking in his favor and his performance has been impressive. Veteran running back Latavius Murray missed the early part of training camp to recovery from off-season ankle surgery. With Murray on the PUP list to open camp, Cook got the opportunity to work with the first-team offense and did well, especially as a receiver. As Sam Bradford told Chris Thomason of the Pioneer Press, I think HES going to be a valuable asset, not only in the run game, but I think we're going to be able to utilize him in the pass game. That is music to the ears of fantasy players, as it adds another way for Cook to rack up points. Murray didn't see game action until the Minnesota Vikings' third preseason tilt against the San Francisco 49ers, and even then, Cook got the start. While Murray and Jerick McKinnon will get their chances, Cook seems to have a strong hold as the lead back. The biggest concern is a shaky offensive line, which was a problem last season and remains an issue heading into this season. It's the primary reason I don't have Cook ranked higher. Current ranking RB19, initial ranking RB26. Nothing has gone right for Tyrod Taylor in August. Enter your NAME. USA Today Sports. In the span of less than a month, Tyrod Taylor went from a nice QB value to a player who needed his starting role clarified in back-to-back games. The Buffalo Bills sent Taylor's best receiver, Sammy Watkins, to the Los Angeles Rams. They attempted to cushion that blow by acquiring Jordan Matthews from the Philadelphia Eagles. You don't need me to tell you that's a downgrade. Taylor lost another potential weapon when Anquan Boldin retired just 13 days after signing with the Bills. That leaves Matthews, rookie Zay Jones and T. Charles Clay as the top options in the receiving corps, although LeSean McCoy should also get plenty of targets. To make matters worse, Taylor suffered a concussion in the third preseason game and remains in the protocol, according to Chris Brown of BuffaloBills.com. Obviously, you can't assume anything when it comes to concussions, so Taylor isn't a lock to be on the field for the regular season opener. While they'll never admit it, trading Watkins seemed like the start of the Bills quietly giving up on the season, and if that's the case, expect them to take a look at rookie QB Nathan Peterman at some point during the year. Current ranking QB 24, initial ranking QB 16 with Julian Edelman up. Brandon Cooks is shooting up draft boards. Jim Rogish Getty Images. It's not the way you want it to happen, but Brandon Cooks finds himself as the clear top WR for the New England Patriots. In the team's third preseason game, Julian Edelman suffered a complete ACL tear in his right knee, according to Albert Breer of the MQB. For a time, I was a believer in taking Edelman's value over Cooks based on what was typically a 2-round difference before the preseason got underway. But while putting together my initial rankings and projections, I found myself wanting Cooks even though he'd cost a higher pick, considering the Patriots gave up 2017 first and third round picks for Cooks and a 2017 fourth round pick. A big role is clearly in the plans for him. Knowing the Patriots have a tendency to trade out of the first round but instead used that pick to get an established player tells me they coveted him. After ranking him as a low and WR1, I had no plans of moving Cooks higher, as that felt aggressive enough. But the injury to Edelman gave me reason to push him further up the draft board. While Cooks and Edelman had different roles, eliminating a player who had a 29.1% target share last season has to increase the volume of Cooks' targets. Current ranking WR8, initial ranking WR12. Andrew Luck's shoulder recovery is taking far longer than expected. Kirby Liusa Today Sports. I'd like to say I'm surprised to still be discussing Andrew Luck's shoulder recovery, but I'm not, and that's a bummer. During my time in the fantasy industry, I've learned to not assume anything when it comes to injury timelines, especially when talking about months instead of weeks and days. Despite a lack of solid information about Luck's return to football activities, I heard no concern about him in my conversations with other fantasy analysts or lowered expectations from fantasy players. Without a timetable to work off, I didn't assume anything about Luck's recovery, so when he opened training camp on the PUP list, I wasn't shocked. Luck hasn't committed to any timeline for a return at any point during the off-season and now into the preseason. As of August 22, head coach Chuck Pagano said he still doesn't have a timeline for Luck, according to Stephen Holder of the Indianapolis Star. Luck remains on the PUP list, so he hasn't practiced at all with less than 2 weeks until the start of the regular season. None of the information on Luck has been positive, so expecting him back for week 1 seems foolish. In fact, the longer he sits, the harder it is to feel good about his fantasy prospects when he finally does take the field. Obviously, this has also led to a drop for T.Y. Hilton since backup QB Scott Tolzien looked terrible in the preseason. Current ranking QB 10, initial ranking QB 5. Kareem Hunt will be a key part of the Chiefs' offense. Aaron Dostorusa Today Sports. Much like with Brandon Cooks, I've been high on Kareem Hunt despite a challenge for touches, but also like Cooks, that challenge has disappeared. According to Kansas City Chiefs head athletic trainer Rick Burkholder, Spencer Ware tore his PCL and has additional damage that is expected to end his season, as BJ Kissel of Chiefs.com relayed. I wrote about Hunt as a sleeper 2 weeks ago when he was going off the board as RB37 while Ware was around RB21. I've had Hunt ahead of Ware in my rankings with the expectation that the more talented, younger Hunt, 22, would eventually take the starting job away from Ware, 25, during the season. Obviously, with Ware's injury, the door is wide open for Hunt to make a major impact in both fantasy and reality as a rookie. Head coach Andy Reid already confirmed Hunt would be the next man up, according to Adam Teicher of ESPN.com. The good news is Hunt has plenty of practice and preseason game action with the first-team offense and has looked good. Reid has a great history when it comes to coaching high-end fantasy running backs, such as Jamal Charles, LeSean McCoy and Brian Westbrook. The Chiefs are short on playmakers other than Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, so expect Hunt to have a big role as the lead back all season. Hunt's rise in value comes from a clear path to lead the backfield in touches and the teams need to have an effective rushing attack. Current ranking RB11, initial ranking RB32. Mike Gililey hasn't made a strong impression in the preseason. Rick Ozentowski Associated Press. Trying to project the 2017 New England Patriots backfield might be the hardest task of my career. In any year, figuring out what head coach Bill Belichick is thinking when it comes to his running backs is tough, but at least roles have been somewhat well-defined based on personnel. The lines are blurred more than ever this year. Mike Gililey was signed from the Buffalo Bills with a belief that he'd handle a similar role to LeGarrette Blount from 2016. Blount was the lead rusher and gave the team a reliable ground game. He was also a bruiser who finished drives and ran down the clock at the end of comfortable victories. The major concern for Gililey was the 299 carries Blount handled last season. Granted, Blount ran for just 3.9 yards per carry, but he did enough in his role to be a reliable producer for fantasy. Although 18 touchdowns will boost the fantasy value of any player, taking on Blount's role would mean a serious uptick in Gilliely's workload compared to the first 4 seasons of his career when he had a total of 154 carries, including a career-high 101 last year as the number 2 back in Buffalo behind Leslie and McCoy. The more I thought about it, the more concern I had for Gilliely's ability to handle such a big role. A hamstring injury cost Gilliely about 2 weeks in August and held off his debut until the 3rd preseason game. According to Zach Cox of NESN.com, Belichick said Gilliely still has quite a ways to go and referenced the time Gilliely missed during off-season workouts and training camp. It's far from an endorsement of a player who was expected to lead the team in carries. Having versatile options such as Rex Burkhead, James White and Dion Lewis in the same backfield gives the team plenty of tools at its disposal. Plus, with such a deep backfield, the Patriots don't have to rush Gilliely into a big role. I ranked Gilliely too high to begin with, but between Gilliely's injury, Belichick's comments and the rest of the team's backs, there's no reason to have a strong commitment to him in fantasy or reality. Current ranking RB35, initial ranking RB29. Look for Doug Martin to step into a big role after his suspension. Aaron Dostarusa, Today Sports. You're probably wondering how Doug Martin can be on the rise when he won't be on the field for the first 3 games of the season due to a 4-game suspension that dates back to last year. Based on how Martin's looked in the preseason, I expect him to get the starting job back upon his return, especially since Jacquizz Rodgers is his only true competition. The suspension seems to have motivated Martin to improve himself on the field, so he'll be ready when his suspension concludes. Last year, Martin carried 144 times for 421 yards, putting him at an ugly 2.9 yards per carry. Just 1 year prior, Martin averaged 4.9 yards per carry and ran 1,402 yards. Because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers look more potent than they ever have during Jameis Winston's tenure, when Martin returns, he won't have to carry the offense the way he's done in the past. Over his first 5 seasons, Martin averaged 17.8 carries per game. If he doesn't have the same busy workload, he should be more efficient, which should work in his favor. Current ranking RB28, initial ranking RB35. Sammy Watkins already had a lot to prove before he was traded to the Rams. Theron W. Henderson, Getty Images. After Sammy Watkins missed 11 games over the last 2 seasons, the Buffalo Bills decided against picking up his 5th-year option. That seemed surprising, but was just the first part of their plan to move on from the player they traded up to get with a number 4 overall pick in the 2014 NFL Draft. A day after Buffalo's first preseason game, it dealt Watkins to the Los Angeles Rams. Tyrod Taylor might not be a top 10 or even top 15 QB, but he's good enough to get Watkins the ball, and the two had somewhat of a connection. Now, Watkins has to rely on second-year QB Jared Goff, and that's troublesome. Not only does Goff need to come a long way in his development, but he's also learning a new system under head coach Sean McVay. In addition to Watkins also having to learn a new system, he hasn't had a lot of time to build any chemistry with Goff, which might explain why he has just 2 receptions for 8 yards in 2 preseason games with the Rams. I wasn't high on Watkins coming into the preseason, but I recognized his talent could shine through if he stayed healthy in a decent situation as the top option in Buffalo. From a talent standpoint, he's the best receiver the Rams have, but he'll need time to acclimate. Don't be surprised to see Watkins struggle for fantasy production early in the season. There's not much working in his favor. Current ranking WR35, initial ranking WR34.